You have choices, you make decisions. Let's have a discussion about that today with Anna Dannfeld and myself, Claudia Cimenti. Let's get to it. Anna, hi.
Yes, interesting subject. It sounds so easy, but there's a lot more in it than we actually think, right?
Yeah. Why don't you get us started?
Okay. I'd like to talk, you said choices and decisions, that actually when we think we're making choices, we're making decisions. You made this point, and I think it's very important to remember that it's not just happening to us, we are making it happen. So in everyday life, we've got all these little micro moments when we make decisions or we have these choices, but we don't think about it because it's so natural. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I sit? Do I stand? Do I take this seat? Do I take that seat? Do I eat fish or meat? Whatever. All these tiny that just sort of pass, and we don't realize that we do it. So when we come to the bigger things, should I move? Should I change my job? Then it becomes this big, scary monster. Oh, I have to make a choice. I have to make a decision. And how do I do this? And I think to understand that we're doing it all the time sort of indicates that we have it built into our system, the innate knowledge of what we actually want to decide. And that's a little bit where I'd like to go with that we know always inside what we want to do. I have a really great example. I have a tiny bedroom, and I had it set up in a way, my bed. And one day it just came to me, I want the bed in the corner. I want it there. And then I was like, yeah, but if, and then instead of just deciding, because I talked to my daughter. I'm like, oh, what do you think? Should I move? She's like, you already decided, move the bed. And I realized that I had already made that decision to move the bed. But then my monkey brain started acting up, saying, well, are you really sure about that? You will lose some space there, and you will, So very often we have made a decision when we have a choice, but we do not trust ourselves to follow through on our decision, right? Yeah. And then it's good to ask somebody.
Wow, you touched on so many things here. So let me maybe summarize in very broad strokes, right? Decisions are not only the big, huge, life-altering decisions, but they're also the smaller ones, the everyday ones, right? You mentioned that if we become aware of these micro decisions, as you call them, that we do all the time, then maybe we actually will be able to build up this trust to make proper decisions as we go along. So yes, I don't think actually that we should always blindly trust the decisions that we made or we're about to make. I think that sometimes decisions can be made by not ourselves, but by voices, by things that were introjected in our being, by authority figures, by society, and things like that. So I think that, yes, we absolutely have to have this awareness that we are making decisions and do them consciously, but then also over time, and potentially together with a coach, really examine what are these guiding principles that we use to make decisions, right? Is it really these I ought to, I should, I must because of some circumstance or because of some external rule that was put onto me and so on? Or is it really something that we feel really free to choose? And it's truly our decision. Sometimes we speak in different voices. Sometimes we hear something and it's the voice of our mother.
I was just going to say, mama.
Right? It's the voice of the boss, or it's the voice of the husband or wife or whatever.
Influences. in our
And
lives.
these influences, and some of these influences were introjected really when we were very small, and where we relied on them to give us guidance in our young age. And as adults, sometimes it behooves us to re-examine those decision criteria that we use. Right. So yes, trust yourself. Like if you know, and also don't second guess yourself so much if you made a decision. Like move that bed, right? Move it. What's the worst that can happen
That's
anyway?
funny though. That's funny though. You have to have a giggle at that.
Yeah. It's really, really crazy. And I mean, for me, today I ordered myself a raising desk.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the decision that I would get a desk that then would allow me to kind of change position, because I'm in Zoom conferences a lot each day, or that would actually allow me to stand, you know, for periods of time when so that I'm not always in the same position. That was done. That decision was done, but I had so much trouble pressing that pay button. But so these awarenesses, like it's already decided, just now do it, right? And stick with it and don't second guess. So that's definitely a big thing. So what is your comment on this long-winded thing that I just did here?
I agree with you. I think that we live a lot of our lives on a lot of levels from programming we've received throughout life, teachers, parents, society, blah, 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 right? And I think it's important that we figure out along the way, what is mine? What belongs to me? And usually when we make the decisions based on an outer influence, either they feel like really safe, I'm doing what I'm told, or but they also feel slightly uncomfortable, you know, because they don't really fit with who you are. You know what I mean? And I think also there's a important part where we will make decisions that are wrong, right? We don't always make the right decisions, but the wrong decisions are the learning curve for us to understand, did I make this decision based on what somebody else wanted me to do? Or did I just need to learn this lesson? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. And very often we just berate ourselves and say, oh, I'm so stupid, I shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying, now that's interesting that I did that. I wonder what I needed to learn. What is my lesson in this? And straight away, you flipped something negative into something positive. And I think a lot of people have problem with decision making because they're afraid of the effects, where it will take them, what will happen. Maybe it's not right. And I think it's really important not to be afraid of that, because if it's not right, it's like school. Huh? Life is like school. When you've got these hard times and you're learning things and things are not functioning and you're tearing your hair out by the roots, this is school. This is, you know, the learning curve. And then you have these times of absolute bliss. You're lying in the hammock, scratching your belly, having a chocolate and smiling at the sun, you know. That's the ferie, that's the holidays. But life is not a long holiday, and life should not be a long holiday. So this decision making and making good decisions or bad decisions, it doesn't really matter, because it's all about us learning about ourselves and what we want to do in life. And a bad decision, the experiences from that will probably propel us forward much stronger than a very balanced, perfect decision. Yeah. School versus holiday.
Yeah, the thing, life in general, in any case, it has so many shades of gray. It's not a black and white thing. We're not doing mathematics when we do life. And so, you know, and many things are just not foreseeable. And I know also from personal experience, even though it has gotten better through life, is this analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
that you get stuck in this mode where you actually don't move forward because you not, I mean, you don't move forward to take this decision, which is this moment in time when you go from analysis and contemplation to actually having taken the decision. It's a moment in time, and you have the before and the after. So and so many push it out and push it out and push it out and push it out and push it out, that in the end the decision is not being made, to the detriment and to a known detriment. And we come again to this idea of pick your discomfort, because taking an unknown or let's say taking a decision with unknown consequences and not taking a decision with unknown consequences, they're both kind of painful and uncomfortable. The this idea of wrong, I think that's a prime example of growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? As Carol Dweck, a Stanford professor, I think she's from Stanford, has written largely about. And it's kind of this idea that, yes, if we have a challenge or a failure in life, as long as we learn from it, as you pointed out, Anna, it is not really a failure. It is not really a failure. And so sometimes you have to live with this not knowing and take the decision anyway.
Yeah.
Not knowing and take the decision anyway. There's an image that sometimes helps certain people, is you decide that you're going to climb the mountain, but all you see, maybe there's fog, all you see is 2 steps in front of you. Some people don't start climbing the mountain because they don't have a very clear view of the entire path up to the summit, and therefore they don't start. And sometimes you have to take the decision to climb the mountain, even though you don't know how the path looks like.
So like life. Because you can't know. I think also that sometimes when it's this wibbly wobbly, oh, should I not, should I not, I sort of think, just make a decision and go for it. You can always change it later. It doesn't mean that this will be for the rest of your life. This is a momentary thing. I usually say, because that's the feeling I have, is that life is very long, time is short. Time feels very short, but life is long. And, you know, looking back on my 60 plus years, there's so much in there. And I realized, oh man, life is long, but it feels like it was gone, you know, like this. So there's always time to change your mind. Just because you make a decision doesn't mean this is for life. You're tied into that forever. Just pick one and move forward, like going up the mountain, because even chances are that even if you've got this whole trail set out, once you embark on that trail, you're going to see when you get closer, oh no, I can't move there. Oh, that didn't work. I have to rethink my strategy. There is no clear line. And I think if we can accept that, it's much easier to make decisions. If we can give ourselves the allowance that I'm allowed to change my mind, like we talked about in an earlier call, I'm allowed to change my mind if this decision didn't sit right. I'm allowed to screw up if I'm not really good at whatever. I'm allowed everything. This is my life. I can do anything I like. And I think then it's easier to make decisions to say, well, whatever, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'll just go for it now, you know?
And that I think even holds when you have to invest in your decision, right?
Yeah.
If you start a small business, let's say, and there's actual financial commitments that you have to make, right? Imagine it doesn't work out and the company, and I'm not saying it will, but the company would fold like a couple of years down the road. Just imagine how much you have learned,
Yeah.
And how even in things like that, the money that you lost, and hopefully it didn't bankrupt your entire family, right? That's
If you're
another
clever, it didn't.
another day, right? But even a potential startup investment that you lost is such. It's just the money you paid for education.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
the tuition for the experience. And the only way that you can learn how to successfully run a business is by running a business. And if the first one doesn't work out and the second one doesn't work out, you will not run the third one the same way that you ran number one and number two, right? So let's hope. and so even for that, just like when you go to the movies, the ticket price is the cost of entertainment. You do not have anything later when you walk out of the movie theater than your enjoyment and your experience. It's the same thing for these kind of things, right? You walk out of this experience just in the worst case where it didn't work, right? I'm not, obviously it can
Oh,
be
that happens.
work, right? It happens that it works. It's the price of this experience ultimately. And sometimes if we look at these investments, especially people that might have trouble committing money to something, because there's a lot of people like that, myself included. Actually, if I have to put investments on the table, it's a much different decision than if it's just if it doesn't involve money, right? Yes. And so it's just the price of the experience. So that also should not hold you back that much. Of course, all these decisions need to be very reflected and conscious. And you are an awareness coach. And I agree with you that coming to decisions, even small ones, with truly conscious awareness is key. Can you talk us a little bit more about it?
Yeah. I was thinking, going back to your business thing there, you open a smart business, you put money in there and so, and about hopefully you didn't bankrupt the family. Now, here is, I mean, I've done lots of things that didn't work. My greatest learning curve is screwing up, learning from my mistakes. I'm really good at learning from my mistakes. And I think the point is that when you make you can't be just, whoa, crazy, and go for it. You have to still think. If I want to invest my money in a business and I have a family to support, I will pay attention that, okay, I'm not going to invest all of it with the chance of losing it. When I make that investment, I know that it might go down the drain, that it might not work for whatever reasons. It doesn't matter. It might not work, because that is always on the table. That's part of the choice bit, yeah, or decisions you have to make. But I will make this decision with the idea in the back of my head that if this doesn't work, it will not bankrupt my family. I'll make sure that we have roof over our heads and food in our bellies, even if it's just porridge instead of whatever nice, it doesn't matter. But you still have to be aware of what you're doing and where you're going, and not just throw yourself headlong into it if it is something that can impact other people. If it's just about yourself and it's just about the personal impact, be my guest, go ahead, do whatever you like. That doesn't matter. But the moment you take responsibility for somebody else, you have to keep that in mind when you make your decisions, because that was a decision, that came before.
Because with every decision comes responsibility.
Yeah.
Responsibility to ourselves, but also responsibility of for the impacted system. Right. And, if the family is part of the system, you have to take that into account. Obviously, all the truly good decision-making ways and critical thinking skills apply. That goes without saying, right? So yeah, you have, it has to be what in coaching circle we call ecologically sound. It has to fit into the system and not endanger it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. The and that is a sense of awareness of the impact of our decisions that are more far-reaching than just ourselves. Just because we are passionate about something or have gotten convinced about something does not necessarily de facto make it the right choice to make.
Or maybe it's just not the right time. Sometimes it's also that. Maybe it's just not the right time. And to add on to that, I'd like to say, because we were talking about this analysis paralysis, right? Because that's also, if you have this responsibility for the family and you want to open a business, maybe that's a risk in that equation, that, oh, but what if, and the family, and so, and this is also part of the awareness to see exactly, I can do this anyways, but I have to do it in this way. There are always multiple decisions within the decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The why, the what, and the how. It definitely, I mean, thank you, Sinek, for that. But it's like, why, what, and how really make it stick. I would like to maybe here take just a moment to talk about the react versus respond as it pertains to decisions, right? We have talked about it before. And for me, I think it's one of the main everyday impactful things that we can incorporate into our everyday.
Awareness.
It's this awareness, right? So yeah, and I always say 1 foot above and 1 step behind. And you kind of, with this little bit of cognitive distance, you observe yourself and your thought patterns and the way that you interact with the world, right? You do not make judgment about anything, you just observe, for starters, right? And so if you start to really pay attention, because that's really what it is, pay attention what's happening without judgment, you're gonna see that, oh, when this type of trigger comes, there's this tendency to react this way, automatically. And there's a reaction, trigger reaction, without any kind of conscious thought. Let's just take an example. Cookie on the table, I grab it, I eat it. Right? I mean, many, people can relate to that kind of thing, that sometimes it can be this just reaction. Availability, I eat it. It's automatic, and there's not any kind of stop and think in the middle between the seeing it and the grabbing it. Once awareness kicks in, then it's like, oh, cookie on the table, I'm grabbing for it. How come I'm grabbing for it? Is it in my best interest to grab it and eat it? And because you can still decide to eat it. You can still decide to eat it. Nobody here says eat it or don't eat it. It's just like this moment of consciousness in the middle. And it's a moment very often. A moment. It's just like, oh, I was just about to eat this cookie. Oh, it's okay, I can. Or maybe not. It's this contemplation. And I think in everyday decision making, it is really important to have this awareness. What do you think, Anna?
I think basically it's like response is decision. Reaction is just happening. And I think this is such an interesting subject. And I've been looking at it and working with my clients and studying it, and a lot with my children. Children are so good to practice on. So all through the years, ever since they were small, and basically the idea I had, and this is way back in the late 80s or so, I had this sudden idea that we're moving backwards into the future, right? Because every time something happens, we're like, oh, archive. Oh, yep, that's close enough. This is it. And we react to this trigger from our archive. And it may not even be exactly the same. It's just close enough because it triggers the same kind of emotions or whatever, right? So then I was watching my children because that was the first. And I'm like, no, I have to think about this. And then I was watching my children and they had this, we had on video Mozart's the Zauberflöte, and my children absolutely loved that. And they could watch it over and over and over again. They were watching it every day, And there was one part with the dragon, and my son was absolutely panically afraid of this dragon. And every time they saw it, every time that dragon came on, he was like, "Wah!" and ran out of the room and hid behind a door. Because it's not that he didn't remember that the dragon wouldn't come. It's just that children do not react. They respond to a trigger over and over again.
They react to a trigger. They do not respond to a trigger.
Well, they react, but they don't do it. It's not like, oh, I know what this is. You see? So every time something is coming, they have this ability of seeing it for the first time. And then if it's response or reaction, whatever, but that really was something for me, that they are so in the present that everything is the first time, even when it's 111th. And to me, that was fascinating. And I thought, hang on a minute, that's how we have to be. It wasn't so clear in my head back in the day. This is 40 years ago. So, or 35. And I realized that we don't do this because we decide that, oh, this is that, or this is that. And then we're just reacting on whatever is coming in according to our archive, right? We don't stop and say, hang on a minute. What is this? What is this that is happening now? Could I learn something from it? Is this something new? Is this, how interesting? But of course, this entails slowing down. That you have to slow down and start becoming aware of what's going on inside, what's going on in your head, what's going on in your emotions, because very often they're emotional triggers, and emotion sits in your body. So if you become aware of what's going on in your body and you feel that happening in your solar plexus or whatever, I'm experiencing a trigger. What's going on? So these little awarenesses can be game changers. Then we don't have to think so much about it. We just realize the trigger, and that says, oh, something is on. Let's look at this again. What is this?
Yeah. Because awareness is a modern human thing, right? A lot of these basic emotional reactions and these ingrained built-in habits and things like that, they get ultimately handled by the amygdala and the limbic brain and the lower brain functions. And our neofrontal cortex, our higher thinking brain, in some of these cases doesn't even get involved. It doesn't get involved. But then having this moment of awareness, where you kind of, the moment you hear your little voice in your head giving a commentary, like, oh, look at there, there's
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Then you're already thinking. And then you can consciously decide. Then you're in response mode to a trigger. You can consciously decide. You can weigh pro and con, and ultimately, how you ultimately decide is up to only you.
Yeah,
it's your decision, but with your responsibility. The consequence is your responsibility. And if we do not pay attention to our mechanisms by which we make decisions, and whether they are in tune and in line with who we are, or whether they are really focused from an external kind of set of criteria and things like that, that is really what impacts you and makes your life, because I really think that life is nothing but a set of decisions that you take along the way. That's life. That's life. And the worst thing that people can do, I think, is not taking decisions and abdicating that power and that freedom of making decision to others or to society or to their idea how their life should be, without really taking empowered action.
And then, of course, very often such individuals are sad, they're depressed, I'm not getting what I want, I don't feel happy, and this and that. But I think also that is part of our programming, especially I think for my generation that grew up in a much, what should we say, harsher format. You know, you spank your children, you put them in line, you don't drive them by you don't encourage them, you punish them to success, you know, a little bit, because that's where the world I grew up in. And then of course you become paralyzed in a way to make a decision, because if it's wrong, the consequences are so massive. You know what I mean? So I think this is also the point. My children can ask me sometimes, as I say, I use them a lot as experimental things. I just watch, you know, I don't go in there, I just watch and listen. And they say, what would you say if I? And I'm like, well, it's not for me to say, it's your life. But the point in this is, if you, there will always be consequences. Are you prepared to take those consequences? And if not, well, maybe it's not a good idea to do that. And they're like, because it tried to catch, right? And I'm like, and this is the thing. What should I do now? Or they say, can I do this? And I say, I don't know. Can you? For example,
can you live with the consequences of taking decision? And can you live with the consequences of not taking the decision? Right.
You live with consequences.
And that's where that always comes in. I think the symptoms of you know, taking the wrong one, if we just come back to that, very often it has symptoms, and the symptoms do not always pop up immediately at the moment or the moments after the decision, but it can be a discontent 6 months later. It can be self-sabotage and procrastination and just a general feeling of malaise, right? I mean, just it's not right. It's not right. And so when you feel things like that it just isn't right, it doesn't feel right, and you lack the passion and motivation to go after it, that's maybe a decision you took sometime in your past that maybe wasn't exactly right for you then at that moment, or for you now in your current situation. And then, you know, give yourself the permission to go back and reconsider, reassess, change, and, you know, change gears to something slightly different. Yeah.
Yes, because of course, every time we make a decision, it propels us onto a certain path, right? And every time there's a point of decision making, the possibilities or the choices are endless. It's not just left or right. I mean, they're seriously endless. And every path we take, it looks like this, but it's going to grow into endlessness as well. So we're propelled onto that path. And that's why I think it's so important also to allow yourself to say, nah, this isn't really my thing. I don't feel really good with this. I'm going to change this, because we have that power to change if we want to. You don't have to stick to your guns. And maybe, again, I don't know if we touched on it before, maybe COVID is also showing us that very clearly, because I think a lot of people wanted to change things and they didn't know how, or they didn't realize that they wanted to, or they were too afraid to do it. And suddenly this opportunity comes, because we always talking about how bad COVID is, but I'm seeing so many positive impacts coming through COVID as well. And I prefer to look at the positive because I cannot change COVID, right? So I'm not going to sit there and cry. I'm going to go for the good stuff and say, oh, look, there's some good shit happening here. And then suddenly there is this possibility to allow yourself to change something that you're not happy about.
You know what? I actually think that might make a very beautiful other video or next video, because, you know, what the positive impact of COVID, you know, on our person and the way that we make decisions. Maybe let's talk about it.
We take that COVID pro and con.
Yes, exactly. So do you have something else to say? Otherwise, we're going to wrap this discussion up. It was wonderful, beautiful. Everybody listening here, I hope you liked it. If you did, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you have questions or possible suggestions for future video topics, go to the website www.topcoachluxembourg.lu/YouTube and drop us a line and let us know if you want to join us on the show at some point. Anna, thank you so much, and see you next time.
Claudia.
Bye.
Bye.